أيوة. start recording. Okay. Okay, the lesson today will be about the definition of species. You are going to discuss the species concept from different points of view, and then the limitation of a species model, and identifying a species. So how can we know the species? Number one are used to measure the biodiversity. Like the last lesson, if we know the number of species in an ecosystem or an environment, so we will be able to measure the degree of biodiversity that you'll learn about it by the end of the lesson. 2. Changes in species help monitor the effect of both environmental changes and the changes due to human activity. So if you know the number of species, so you can measuring the change let you to know the effect of the environment or of human on the natural environment. 3. Biologists look for adapting species and for changes in and the numbers. Look for adaptation within species. So if you have a species, in any living in any community, our number of species live together and interacting. If we have a species of the living organism, also we need to know the behavioral pattern of the living organisms, how they breed, how they take their food, how they take care of youngs. So if we know also the number of species and study them, we'll be able to change that can happen in their types and in their number. And then need to know how to identify or how to unify the model of the species. We said that species now we need to unify the language when we talk about a species of living organism. Did you get this point? First model of species was the morphological concept. Morphological species concept were from the time of Linnaeus, the Greek philosopher. So long time ago, the definition of species was as per Linnaeus model. We explained last lesson that the Linnaeus model depended in his definition on the appearance of the organism, morphology of the organism, internal and external. So we can refer to the shape of the living organism, to the shape of the limbs, the skull, some of the internal features, and also the external features. We call both of them physical properties. Physical, we mean here the internal and external morphology of the living organism. After Linnaeus put his model, of course, 500 years after Linnaeus, people were able to know more details about the structure of the cell and the DNA and the relation between a living organism based on their DNA structures. So there were many limitations for Linnaeus model. The first limitation, we call it sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism, you can see two living organisms that look different, not because they belong to different species, but because they are sexually different. Like if you look for a female lion, they look different from each other, not because they belong to different species, but because they have different function in their environment. And also there is variation within species, like between me and you and your siblings, there are variations. So we cannot also consider both of you belong to different species. There were some the limitation that were in Linnaeus model. Did you get the limitation? Okay. Okay. It was saying that Linnaeus. Linnaeus based in his classification on the morphology of the organism. Morphology, we mean external and internal features. But after putting his model, it has shown some limitations, some problems. The first one, we call it sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism, if you look at the peacock, you can look in the book. Did you see the picture of the male and female peacock in the book? Yeah, they look different. The big one is the male, the small one is the female. Page 251, 151. Okay, so they are different in appearance. But according to Linnaeus, if they have different morphology, we should put them into different species. But we can't because they can interbreed. And they belong to the same species and they give fertile offsprings. Did you get the point? Sexual dimorphism? Yes, of course, they are the same organism, same species. Just different due to male and female, being a male or being a female. This is the only difference. The only difference between them in the looking, in the appearance. Because one of them is the male and one is the female. Okay? Okay, the second one, variation within species. Like variation between you and your sibling, your mother, your father, you look different because of the normal genetic variation. So also we cannot put them into different species or many different species. Okay? I did not go to this definition. I'm just explaining the first definition now. The morphological species concept. I didn't go to the second point. I explained only Linnaeus model and its limitation. Okay? The second, we call it reproductive model or biological species model or concept. This is based on the reproductive behavior of the organism. So they depend on classification of species if the living organism is capable to reproduce or not. If the two living organisms can reproduce and produce fertile offspring, so we put them in one species. This is why we call this model reproductive species concept. Okay, so it depends on the ability of the organism to reproduce or the behavior of the organism during reproduction. It has an advantage because it overlaps like sexual dimorphism that were in Linnaeus model. So here, because we can see varieties of living organisms in the same species can reproduce, and also male and female of the same species can reproduce. So in this way, we overcome the problems of the Linnaeus model. But it still has some limitation also. Number one, interbreeding may not be attemptable. Sometimes, because I will show you now some examples, sometimes you can see two living organisms, they look similar and they can interbreed, but they don't produce offsprings. Or sometimes the interbreeding is not accessible. Suppose the male and female are living in different areas or they are very far away, so they will not interbreed. So in this way, we cannot make sure that they belong to the same species or to a different species because they didn't try to interbreed. Did you get the point? Some living organisms live in different geographical areas. Male and female, they are separated by barriers, so they can't reproduce, even though they belong to the same species. This was one of the limitations of the reproductive model. Okay? Fine. Go to the next point. Different what? Salah, I think he did not get. First one is not about the limitation was about different gender. The second one, the limitation is because they cannot interbreed. They cannot meet. They live in different areas. They are separated by barriers in their environment. Like if a mountain has appeared and separate a land into two different areas. So the male on one side of the land cannot meet the female on the other side of the land. Of the land. Although they belong to the same species. Okay, يعني they can't interbreed because they didn't try. Okay. Hmm. Yes, advantage of biological concept, problems of the morphological concept. Overcome the sexual dimorphism and overcome the variation within species. Sexual dimorphism is overcome here because the two different organisms, the two different genders, they can reproduce. So we do not depend on, in our classification or in our definition, on the morphology. We depended only on their ability to reproduce, regardless the sexual dimorphism and regardless the variation within species. Okay. طيب. In birds, in the one at the bottom. Okay. They are male and female. They look different. Okay. So according to morphological definition, are different species or one species? Guys, diagram at the bottom, the picture at the bottom. Yeah, I'm asking you, as per the morphological definition, we consider them belong to the same species or different species? Different species. According to the morphological definition, they belong. You can see. It depends on which definition you are on. If the picture now, صح? You can see the picture, the male and female. Why? So sexual dimorphism describe differences in the physical characteristics of the two sexes. Okay. So you have seen here some photos for male and female. Why?